You spotted a celebrity trend. This is you creating a campaign to ride that trend. Just drag and drop your content, media assets, and product catalog onto the page. Change the layout and choose how you want your products to appear. This is your campaign page published. And this is you generating business results.
Hello, everybody. I'm Butch Stearns of the Pulse Network.
And I'm Scott Lewer of Digital Clarity Group.
And welcome to the latest edition of CMS Connected. It is the web content management industry's only news commentary show. Scott, it's great to see you, but you're playing a little hurt today.
You know I am, man. I'm a little under the weather. Caught something in Europe last week and can't seem to kick it, but I'm here, man. I'm here.
All right, no shaking hands then.
No,
We'll just
absolutely. I'll give a little elbow pound there.
Subject of today's show, who's driving the digital commerce bus 2015? A little bit later on, you and I are going to dive very deep into this.
Yeah.
In your opinion, why is this such an important topic, question, theme?
Yeah, I think it's really important because, you know, we talk about digital experiences, and this really is kind of one of the most important pressing needs for organizations today is the ability for them to be able to create these online relationships with their customers and to be able to essentially shift into converting into sales. And so there's a lot of questions that have to be answered here in terms of how they go about doing that, and that's exactly what we'll talk about today.
All right, a tease for what's coming up in this show. We have 3 guests that are going to be joining us throughout the show. In our headline segment, we're going to be joined by James Norwood, who is the CMO of EPiServer, to look into the EPiServer Ektron merger. Seth Earley, frequent contributor to the show, is going to be joining us to talk about Microsoft and SharePoint and what's going on with the latest with that. And Sunny Lenarduzzi will be joining us from Falcon Software in the Spotlight segment, take a closer look at CrownPeak. But first of all, let's thank our sponsors for CMS Connected, our 2 lead sponsors on every show. They are Falcon Software. The people at Falcon Software can provide you with expert advice and integration solutions for all your creative web design, web content management, and e-commerce, social, or mobile needs. And of course, DCG, Digital Clarity Group, a research and advisory firm, multiple award winner, focused on navigating organizations through the digital transformation process. Time now for our headline news segment here on this edition of CMS Connected. In our first story, we take a closer look at the EPiServer Ektron merger and the winners and losers of that merger. Scott, what's significance about this merger?
Sure. I think there's a lot of significance about this merger. For one, you've got Ektron has a really large base of customers, specifically in the US. And EPiServer is one of the largest, most popular products, especially over in Europe. And so you've got 2, really large populous products here coming together that have both their .NET products coming together with large customer bases. And I think that's, so you've got an awful lot of folks here looking at this, wondering what's happening.
All right, let's get a little more insight into this merger, and let's bring in the Executive Vice President of Strategy and CMO at EPiServer. He's James Norwood. James, welcome to CMS Connected.
Thanks, Butch. Thanks, Scott.
Great to have you here. To give us a little more insight on the merger, how did this come about? What's it all about?
Yeah, well, obviously we announced, I guess, about 2 weeks ago now, but we brought these companies together to really address what we believe is a significantly underserved sector of the market. It's a market that is typically characterized by very rapidly growing and mid-sized to larger organizations, and there's absolutely a need for a new digital leader of scale that can address that gap. And these are companies that really don't want to rely on perhaps, or they need something richer than freeware, they need something safer than open source, but they don't want to get involved with the 7-figure payments that some larger enterprise vendors are demanding. So there was absolutely a need for a company of scale that could address that, and the combination of Ektron and EPiServer, in our mind, is absolutely the right fit for that market.
So you started to answer this already, James, but let me ask you anyway, a little more about the strategic vision of this merger? And you talked about how it came about and the need in the market, but what's the strategic vision of it? What's the real benefit?
Yeah, absolutely. So this combination is about creating a leading digital experience delivery platform, basically that is going to be able to empower our customers to create standout experiences for their customers wherever they choose to engage. That's our mission. That's why we brought these companies together. We spent a lot of time looking at this space, trying to find, some really strong, as Scott said, some really strong assets in terms of customer bases, in terms of geographic overlay. And we found two very, very similar organizations, a lot of similarities, a lot of differing strengths and weaknesses that answered each other's needs to move to the next level. And by combining them, we have this strength to actually create now this very strong, what we're calling a digital experience cloud, which will address some of the concerns and the opportunities I alluded to before in terms of this underserved market.
Hey, James. So even the article that we reference on this segment is called Winners and Losers of the EPiServer Ektron Merger. And it's posed as a question by Dom Nicastro over at CMS Wire. And I think that's the buzz that's on the street a lot of times, is who's going to win, who's going to lose in these. And if you look back at other past CMS acquisitions by other CMS vendors where there's kind of more than one product sitting within a portfolio of a company, that there does tend to be one winner and loser. But I don't think it's necessarily always a zero-sum game. Can you tell us about cases in the past where you've actually seen this work well, where both products actually end up thriving?
Yeah, absolutely I can. And that's why I'm so excited about the opportunity we have here at the new EPiServer, because I've been through this before on a number of occasions. I've been through this before with an Excel KKR organization who are obviously our new owners, and they're a great company to have in your back pocket supporting you. So I will talk to that. I will just comment for a moment on all the noise that's out there in the media and online and stuff. And as I often say, as Oscar Wilde once said, there's only one thing worse than being talked about, and that's not being talked about. And obviously there is a lot of interest in this merger, and for good reason, because we're creating something very strong. But look, we all here need to stop talking about each other in this space, and we need to start focusing on the actual issues at hand, and that is helping solve our customers' digital engagement challenges. It's increasingly hard for them to be able to thrive in a disrupted world where just brand loyalty and brand engagement are just really hard to gain and retain. So that's what we're putting all of our energy and focus into, and we're going to do that by bringing these companies and their solutions together. I know it can be done because I've done it before. So I was at Kana Software, which was an Excel KKR company for around 3.5 years. And Kana, as was, merged with another company called Caboodle. Both had very complementary product stacks, very similar to what we're talking about here. The development teams took a lot of time to look at that to make sure that they were comfortable that they could deliver on it, which is exactly what our teams have done here. And they got started, and within 9 months, we brought a converged product to market, which featured code from both sides of the house, as well as a lot of net new code, which is exactly what we're doing with the Digital Experience Cloud. And that helped Kana to grow double-digit growth organically, to go on to greater and bigger and better things, and to really grow market share significantly. So, I've been through it before. I've been through it prior to that. There's a history here in this space of perhaps not as much success, but I don't put it down to the space. I put it down to the management. I put it down to the technology, the culture, the approach, and the support of your owners. And we have a fantastic board that's backing us financially to make this happen.
And what so far has been the reaction from the customers of both camps?
Yeah, so the reaction to everyone we've spoken to has been tremendous. So, from both sides of the house, and whether that's customers, whether that's prospective customers, or whether that's partners on both sides of the house, because partners obviously a very important part of the overall solution that we're offering here. It's been tremendous, and every time we get the opportunity to brief them on our vision and our strategy and how we're going to deliver this to the market so that it's a choice for customers to adopt new capabilities, new converged offerings when the time's right for them, has gone down very, very well. And I haven't yet had a conversation that hasn't ended well. Obviously, we have to get to everyone. Again, there's a lot of noise out there, and every time a merger happens in any industry, competitors are going to come out with a lot of fear, uncertainty, and doubt, and say things like, "Oh, this is the end of the life of your product." Well, it's not. We're going to support and we're going to look after all of our customers, whether they're on Ektron or whether they're on EPiServer, and provide them a future-proof path to the future as well of our solutions. So that's going to happen. We've just announced a 20-city spring roadshow. So we're going to get out there and press the flesh, and town hall style. We want to meet with our customers and partners all up and down the country, here in the US, into Canada, over in Europe, and then on to Asia Pacific. And we expect to get in front of as many of our community and our ecosystem of partners as we can. And I believe that the message will be well received, and will give people the opportunity to ask us the tough questions. We'll share our roadmap, and we'll let them know why we believe that this is an exciting thing for them and will benefit them, as opposed to be something they need to worry about. But look, Scott, here's something else I tell you is we're really not worried. If some customers believe that they're a little concerned about this, or now's the time is right to go out and evaluate a new CMS, we'll take that Pepsi challenge. We think that they go out and they'll ultimately come back and select the Digital Experience Cloud from the new EPiServer, because it's going to feature much of what they've got today, with a roadmap that's going to combine it with new functionality from the other side of the house very quickly, and a lot of net new code, because we have a development organization now that's substantially larger than either company had before. So they're going to get features quicker than they ever did in either company in the past. And I think that's what's not to like about that.
And you mentioned, James, the partner network. And I think if I'm you, the place where I'm focused the most is your partner network, because I think that's the place where you can get the best traction soonest, but it's also the place where you have the most groundwork to make up for. I mean, I think it's pretty well known that EPiServer doesn't have a very big partner network in the US yet. And Ektron has one that, to be honest, could be, they could use some loving, I think. They haven't exactly loved what went on with the management in the last case. So I think you've got a lot of ground to make up there in the partner network. Would love to see how that goes further, but I think that's where you can really, getting to your customers is certainly one, you can go one by one, but getting those partners on board is going to be key for you, I think.
Absolutely right. This is an industry that's characterized by strong partner relationships, and it has to be. Both companies had slightly different approaches in their former incarnations in how they engaged and worked with partners. We believe in working with partners side by side all the way through. We are ramping up to start looking for new partner recruitment. We are bringing in new blood into the company to help us with partner management and partner development. What I will say is that EPiServer was very, very good, and has been very good at developing a very strong partner community, developer community, a lot of certification, a lot of education, and they just didn't have perhaps the foothold over here in the United States to drive that through. So there's a lot of materials there to empower and enable partners. And what we need to do better is now get out, as you say, and make sure that our Ektron and our EPiServer existing partners, certainly here in North America, and those that we'd want to encourage to join our community, are aware of what we do have to offer to enable them to be very, very successful. And what I can also say is we plan to go to market with our partners. We plan to market to them and for them, and we expect it to be a win-win by driving new opportunities for both organizations. We are going to invest in sales and marketing significantly, and again, that's obviously a concern to some of our erstwhile competitors.
James Norwood, Executive Vice President, Strategy, CMO at EPiServer. James, thanks for your time.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
News item number 2 on this edition of CMS Connected. We're going to talk about the Forrester Wave, Scott. Beginning of February, Q1 2015, Forrester has released their latest version of the Wave, covering 10 different vendors: Acquia, Adobe, Ektron, EPiServer, HP, IBM, OpenText, Oracle, SDL, and Sitecore. What's significant about the Forrester Wave in 2015?
Sure. I mean, look, first of all, similarly to the Gartner MQ, it's one of the two kind of blockbuster ones that are out there that give buyers, some sense of who are the leaders, so to speak, in the WCM space. And I think the biggest difference, by the way, between those two is that they only do, in fact, like you said, cover 10 companies. And so the criteria to make it onto this list is higher. You have to have at least $50 million in sales this year. And so they're, because they're covering fewer of them, it tends to be even more for a kind of larger and larger enterprise to be looking at. These are the...
And again, as we dive deeper into the findings of Forrester's Wave for this one, oh, surprise, surprise, Adobe and Sitecore tend to rise above the top, right? No surprise there, right?
Yeah, look, I was really hopeful for this wave because it was Ted Shadler's been a long time, well-respected analyst over at Forrester, and he was fairly new to the WCM space and took this on for the first time from the same folks that had kind of had it for the last few waves. And so I thought we might have a bit of a fresh new perspective here. It seems to look very similar to the last ones, though, although there is one notable difference, which is that they, in fact, and we'll talk about this a little bit later with Seth, but he, in fact, was the first one to finally drop Microsoft SharePoint from the list, which I think was a great thing.
So let's finish up with this. What did we learn, or what do we learn from Forrester's Wave that we didn't learn in Gartner's Magic Quadrant?
I think, to be honest, that we learn a little bit less about the product sets than we do about what Forrester likes. I mean, I think what Forrester clearly shows here, by seeing Adobe pulling away so far from the pack, at one point, so Sitecore and Adobe were more neck and neck, and now Adobe is pulled out front. We also see, in terms of the strength of the kind of the strategy, which is their x-axis there, they tend to like Acquia even better than Sitecore. So we've seen some differences there between the two legacy firms' take on this stuff. But I think they're giving an awful lot of credence to cloud. They really want to see these product vendors move to the cloud. They really want to see the notion of some other capabilities like digital asset management and some of these other things that are not traditionally web content management, but they want to see this notion of a suite pulling together, and that's what they tend to be giving the most credit for.
All right, the Forrester Wave, the latest edition released here in Q1 2015, is our news item number 2 on this edition of CMS Connected. All right, news item number 3 in our headline segments on this edition of CMS Connected. Microsoft shuts shop on SharePoint. Scott, you kind of predicted this.
Listen, I don't want to say that I'm Nostradamus or anything, but
I will.
Okay, cool. I'll take it then. But let's just be really clear. They're not shutting shop on SharePoint. They're shutting shop on SharePoint for web content management. And last month here, what you're referring to is that last month I called out Gartner for their MQ on WCM, asking them why in the world Microsoft was even still on the WCM MQ. And as we just spent a whole segment talking about the Forrester Wave, you see they're no longer on their wave. So, but let's talk to Seth about why that might be.
Yeah, let's get some insight on this and bring in Seth Earley, a frequent contributor here on CMS Connected, CEO of Earley & Associates, who's hanging out in Palm Springs while we're digging out of the snow here in New England. Hi, Seth.
Hi, how are you today? I'm sorry, I didn't mean to rub that in.
Yeah, sure, we know it. What?
I had to attend a conference, just so you know, it's a professional trip only.
Okay. Why did this happen? Why is Microsoft dropping this? What message are they sending?
That's a great question. And the challenge, of course, is that this is an incredibly, incredibly complex ecosystem. The whole world of web content management is highly competitive. It's very, very well funded. There are literally hundreds and hundreds of vendors that are in that space. And there are classes of application that Microsoft really does not have any offerings around. And so what's happening is, SharePoint for public websites, SharePoint as a web content management system is really kind of misplaced, because they were saying, well, it's a lightweight platform for organizations that don't need much, in the way of, they want to do simple websites. But the problem is, simple websites are getting very complex these days. So it was a very clear a challenge that it was very, very difficult for them to work in all of those spaces. So that's kind of the high-level view of this. We can talk about some of the different components that they don't have, but I think it was a clear rationale for needing to do this.
And Seth, hey, this is Scott Lewer. How are you?
Hey, Scott.
So how about, look, I think for a long time, for me, the gig has been up on SharePoint for WCM for a long time. I mean, for the longest, we were always having to make them be a fourth alternative when we do a short list of 3 because we had to satisfy some CIO who wanted to see how SharePoint stacked up against our short list. How about those customers that were out there that have been, working with, I think, fairly tediously and difficultly with SharePoint? I mean, what are they going to do at this point now? Are they moving away from SharePoint entirely, or does it just become a different part of their web ecosystem now?
Well, I think that's the thing to consider is, Microsoft is trying to provide a transitionary period, and they are also offering partnerships and some level of integration. It's not completely clear what that integration will be. However, think of it this way. SharePoint is fantastic for those upstream systems and applications and tools that you need to feed those external capabilities, to feed that. Websites are built on content and collaboration that happens internally in the organization. And then what we're doing is we're surfacing that knowledge, that collaboration, that expertise, that content in the form of a WCMS. So think of it this way. It's a different part of that information ecosystem. It's still very, very important. It's still very important to manage those assets, to look upstream and say, okay, where are my content assets? Where are my marketing assets? How am I leveraging them? How am I creating them? So all of the things that we can do with knowledge bases and collaboration and workflow processes and rich media management, a lot of that can still be done. So then the question is pushing it out to these external systems. But when you think about it, they're intending to allow for integration, but it's going to be still very complex, because when you think of all the things that people are trying to do with modern web content management systems, there's everything from search engine optimization and webinar integration and campaign management and landing page optimization and e-commerce, and literally there are dozens of different applications that need to be supported for external web content. Personalization types of engines, machine learning algorithms. There's a lot of stuff that's going on in that space. So the integration is going to be a challenge. They are providing some provision for that and creating some partnerships, but the level of that integration is still to be determined. But the answer to your question is, it still plays a very valuable role, but in a different part of the process, looking at those internal asset creation processes that are then going to have to be pushed out to these external systems.
Yeah, and I find it interesting that it wasn't very long ago, I think it was at IRCE, the commerce show, where Microsoft announced that their commerce product was going to be working, with Sitecore to do some of their CRM product was going to be working with Sitecore to do the experience delivery part of it. And so that might be a natural shift for customers, is to want to go look at a product like Sitecore. But I wonder, would you also caution them? Because if you're on SharePoint today to satisfy your web content management needs, I would tend to think that you have fairly less mature needs than something like a Sitecore might provide. Would you agree with me there?
Yeah, I would agree with you, and I think what's going to happen though is that the bar is going to be raised for all of these organizations. What you're finding right now is that retail, and I happen to be at a retail and e-commerce show this week here in Palm Springs. Again, had to be here for that, unfortunately. But what you're seeing is that the bar is being raised for everyone by retail sites that are very, very well-designed, great user experience, highly capable in terms of intelligent agents and chat integration and very robust search. And what that's doing is it's raising the bar for all other websites. So business-to-business websites, which probably didn't have as much of a requirement, because a lot of those guys say, we don't really do commerce on our website. We mostly use salespeople and personal relationships. That's changing, okay? So the bar is being raised. So even the people that said, my needs aren't that great, I just need a simple web presence, that's very quickly going to change. Now, to your point, do you want to jump into something that's going to be very, far along the learning curve and the maturity curve? potentially not. You know, you might want to start off with a simpler implementation and start to build on that. So I think your point is to say you can't go from a very low level of functionality and maturity in terms of internal process to something that's very complex and difficult. True, but as I say, the path is going to be there. The bar is being raised for everybody, and so these organizations are going to have to start to move to these more sophisticated and complex types of implementations.
So either way, it certainly sounds like an awful lot of .NET CMS vendors are going to be out there licking their chops, ready to call into the Microsoft client lists, I'd imagine, right?
That's absolutely sure. Yes, they will be. And I think that the thing that is going to be important is that integration. You know, the CMS vendors really should go in there with a strong story about how they are leveraging the strengths of SharePoint. Because think about it, you know, as I mentioned before, SharePoint is a wonderful collaboration tool. It's a wonderful tool for managing structured types of content and facilitating working sessions and working mechanisms. There's a lot of ability around rich media. So again, SharePoint is a great tool. The knowledge management capabilities and the internal content management capabilities are very strong. And so what vendors need to do and what organizations need to do is think about how do I clean up those implementations so that those upstream processes are well designed and my content is well managed to support all of this external capability. And what is that integration story going to be? So I think there's a great future for that combination. I think Microsoft is doing the right thing in terms of stepping back from the web content management world and building those partnerships with other vendors.
Seth Earley is the CEO of Earley and Associates, working on his tan in Palm Springs as we speak. Seth, thanks for joining us on this edition of CMS Connected.
Thanks.
It's great to see you. Okay, bye now.
News item number 4 on this edition of CMS Connected is all about mobile commerce transactions and content marketing for e-commerce. It matters a lot more for e-commerce now. Let me throw some numbers at you. Sure. Mobile commerce transactions in the year 2017 will reach 3.2 trillion. 73% of internet users make online purchases. Think about that, 73%. 3 out of 4 make online purchases now. Probably was 1 out of 4 not that long ago. Businesses are taking this seriously. What are these numbers? What do they tell you?
Yeah, and they're even higher. The percentages are even higher in Europe. So, you know, it just basically means that e-commerce is a force to be reckoned with. At one point, it was kind of the e-commerce team was kind of the small team, and it was all about in-store sales, and this was just kind of a side order. And now it's really becoming prominent. It's becoming the way. And it's also making these businesses global. So any business that previously was local and was selling local now has a global audience. And so we're seeing this idea of content marketing really take things up because it's essentially allowing organizations to put themselves out there, become experts, and then to introduce their products through the course of that.
Yeah, so I don't want to steal our thunder. Right after the break, we're going to dive deeper into the question of who's driving the digital commerce bus. We're going to ask why that question's so important. We're going to talk about different approaches and go into all that. But when we talk about content marketing for e-commerce, what's another key point now that needs to be a wake-up call for businesses if they're not paying attention?
Yeah, I think, you know, look, the idea of content marketing in the first place, what it really says is that, you know, businesses now that take this outside-in approach, that rather than kind of just talking, you know, marketing is about let me tell the world how great I am. Content marketing is about let you discover how great I am, sort of a thing. It's more about
it's all about being where your customers are.
Exactly. That's right. And how can I create content and create insight that's going to help people understand, research, whatever it is that they're looking to do so. And it's about being a part of that conversation and adding value to that conversation. And so the idea then that you can piece together content marketing with something like commerce is a obviously not so trivial thing, because everybody does have something to sell ultimately. But rather than just pushing ads to promote content, rather how can we help to move the conversation along and then be able to have a product to sell at the same time?
All right, those are our headlines in our news segment here on CMS Connected. After this break, we will talk about who's driving the digital commerce bus. But first, a word from EPiServer and eSpirit, and then CMS Connected continues.
You spotted a celebrity trend. This is you creating a campaign to ride that trend. Just drag and drop your content, media assets, and product catalog onto the page. Change the layout and choose how you want your products to appear. This is your campaign page published. And this is you generating business results.
The music, the laughter, the cheer. It's the most wonderful time of the year. Except for these guys. This is your web team. They're wrung out, they're frazzled, and they're scared. Scared they won't get the new product content out to your customers in time. Scared your competition will get to them first. Scared the slightest delay will mean lost revenue and, worse yet, their jobs. There are no visions of sugar plums dancing in their heads. They're drowning in data and systems. They're trying to pull content and information together from every nook and cranny. From technologies like Demandware, Salesforce, SAP, IBM, LifeRay, Brightcove, and even in-house proprietary applications nobody's ever heard of. What's worse? That content needs to be posted to your online storefront, to your company's website, in campaign emails, on mobile devices, customer service portals, and across social media. And it has to be personalized at every touch point of the customer journey. Right now, the clock is ticking. The competition is looming. But it doesn't have to be this hard. Enjoy the music, enjoy the laughter, enjoy the cheer, and enjoy the revenue. With a content management solution that easily integrates with all your systems so that everyone can enjoy the most wonderful time of the year and every day after that. eSpirit, playing now at a website, portal, and online storefront near you.
All right, welcome back to CMS Connected, the web content management industry's only news commentary show. Butch Stearns of the Pulse Network, Scott Lewer of Digital Clarity Group. All right, Scott, I'm going to have at you in this segment with the main question, who's driving the digital commerce bus? So let me make a few statements, and I want you to sort of go off on the importance of this subject in 2015 and beyond, where we are right now. So here's a couple of statements. To me, it's always been about websites doing business. Now it's about digital experiences. And to me, the best of breed companies are the ones that understand that and fully integrate that into a customer experience, from people trying to find you, when they do find you, when they research your products and your solutions and your services, to when they buy, to the customer service after the fact, to being able to brag or complain about it all after that. So when we ask the question, who's driving the digital commerce bus, there's different approaches, there's all different things. Why is this question so important now? Do you agree with everything I said?
Yeah, I agree with what you said. And I think it's really important because, look, again, right now, like you said, digital experiences are what it is. And what is the difference between a website and a digital experience? I mean, I think that's the big question. Is it just the new name for it? I think the point is that you are creating an experience, that a visitor is in fact having an experience on your site. They likely, so many times now, sometimes I go out and I say, okay, I want to visit xyz.com because I want to buy something. Other times, though, I'm just researching a topic, and I don't even necessarily know where I land because I get there because I come from search. And so it lands me on somebody's site that I'm not necessarily familiar with the brand, but I'm reading it because they've got some good content for me. And then next thing I know, I find myself looking at their products. And so ultimately, this creates this kind of contextualized experience. And we're talking about this much more of a rich environment that is streamlined and relevant to me because of what it is that I say that I need by my behaviors online.
So let's dive into maybe what I think is a common problem with a lot of companies. Web content management and e-commerce. Because marketers traditionally use WCM, right, to reach their customers. But then an e-commerce platform can be an entirely different site, an entirely different experience. What are the challenges there for companies?
Well, you know, actually, the point that you raised there is it's probably one of the most prominent points in terms of why we have these two different systems. I mean, think about it. It's you've got the marketing team tends to use a web content management platform to get their job done, right? I'm talking about a digital marketing team, and a commerce team, or the sales team is using a commerce platform. And so we've got these two systems now that both have content, that both are relevant, but that ultimately have to come together for this end user who's visiting your site. And the challenge is that both of them present overlapping capabilities, but neither present usually great capabilities for both things.
Well, isn't it as simple as this? They do overlap whether you want to admit it or not.
Yeah.
Because some people by their actions don't admit it. They let people go to that site and they get the transactional experience from e-commerce if they want, or vice versa, right?
Yeah, it's totally true. I mean, how many times is it that you find yourself, you're on a website and you're reading all this great content, and then you decide to go to click over to a product, and you find yourself in this chiclet-looking store that is a completely different experience than that which you just came from. I mean, it's because and it might even be a different URL that you can tell that one is being run by an e-commerce system that is all just about promoting and creating a shopping cart experience, and the other one is about creating dynamic, rich web content.
All right, so before we talk about some different approaches to look at this for organizations, let's jump right ahead and look at the solution. It's an integrated platform, right, that enables all of this? I mean, again, that's the answer to all of this, isn't it?
Yeah, I think ultimately, I'm not even sure if there are products that are there yet, but ideally you have the best of both kind of capabilities, that you have great shopping cart experiences that have, the ability to manage a lot of information about the products, that they can run essentially the supply chain, fairly well, that allow you to be able to check out and to be able to get your merchandise, but they also have the ability to present, content dynamically that's relevant and targeted. You might be able to have capabilities such as A/B testing, those sorts of things, but it's a rare product that actually offers both of those overlapping. So oftentimes, customers have to pick and choose, and they have to decide, do I kind of care more about content and I have more dynamic, mature needs as far as content are concerned, and so my WCM needs are going to kind of lead, and they can be supported by e-commerce, or do I have a larger set of products? Do I have kind of a more mature product taxonomy, and therefore I need a more mature commerce system to kind of drive, and a web content management system will support that. So it's sad that you kind of have to make the choice, but that's been the case thus far.
All right, he's Scott Lewer of Digital Clarity Group. I'm Butch Stearns of the Pulse Network. We're talking about this question on this edition of CMS Connected: who's driving the digital commerce bus? And in your efforts to seek to deliver a truly holistic, unified experience to your customers in every step of the digital customer life cycle, let's talk about different approaches now, because to me, Scott, there's so many factors in this. You could be in a B2B or B2C business. You can be in different verticals, which can drive it. You can have multiple transactions, or you can have one transaction a month, which decides the success or failure of your business. And then you look at your lines of business: marketing, sales, customer service, commerce, e-commerce, all of it that goes into it. So when we look at different approaches, there's a WCM-led approach, there's an e-commerce-led approach, and then there's a sort of hybrid of those two, right?
Sure.
Is there a need for different approaches? I think I just answered my question. There is, because there's not a one-size-fits-all, right?
There's not a one-size-fits-all, but I also think that sometimes it's not that you don't need either or both. It's that it's where does your own maturity lie? So there are plenty of, we were talking earlier even with Seth about SharePoint's capabilities, that it basically is running relatively run-of-the-mill kind of website content that is not necessarily dynamic, not targeted, not segmented, not any of those sorts of things. Doesn't have a lot of campaign management capabilities. If that's what you need from a web content management, then you can probably use the content capabilities of your commerce platform. But it's when you start to have more mature kind of content needs, like you are doing targeting, or you are doing A/B testing, you're running a lot of campaigns, those sorts of things, then you need a more mature platform that typically your your commerce system is not going to be able to provide for you. So, kind of when you look at the challenge, I think, when you're looking at both commerce platforms and web content management platforms is that many of the features, you can tick the box and say, does a commerce platform provide web content management capabilities? Can you add content to it? Sure you can. Can you, but to what degree? Does it have, do you have the same kind of workflow capabilities that allow the kind of approval of content to go on behind the scenes versus is it just kind of product content as it relates to a particular piece of, to a tchotchke that you're selling? So they both tick the boxes, but I think it's really where your maturity lies that you have to answer the question.
Great point. So let's start with a WCM-led approach. With web content management, you deliver the experience, including page generation, personalization, navigation. You use content from both the WCM and the e-commerce repositories. The e-commerce platform in that one acts sort of as a service layer, right?
Yeah.
I guess what are the pros and cons, or what leads you to a WCM-led approach?
Sure. Again, it's back to kind of where that maturity lies. But if you're looking today, a lot of web content, again, the boundaries around kind of what is web content management, as we were even just talking about earlier, have expanded so much. But many of them have the capability of getting web analytics. Just as one example, analytics on my content is to be able to see how my content is performing. Well, most commerce systems are not going to be able to provide that for you. And so therefore, you need to look to a web content management system, web content management led system. Again, I've mentioned it before, but A/B testing, workflow capabilities on your content. Also campaigning. Again, they have campaign management systems, but many of these web content management systems have the notion of campaigns and being able to run those. Same sort of a thing again. If that's something that you have and that's something that you're doing with your website, then I think you're probably going to need a more sophisticated WCM platform to be able to lead your online digital experience.
This might not be the right way to ask the question, but I'm going to ask it anyway. It never stops me. What's the biggest advantage of a WCM-led approach, in your opinion?
I think it is really the idea that you can create a more contextualized experience that is based on what the person has done, meaning where they've clicked, where they've come from, how they've come to your site, what they've done while they're on it, those sorts of things. Because a traditional WCM system is serving up content, based on your interactions with it, and so. A site that has more content and that has more rich dynamic kind of capabilities because of that is going to be able to take advantages of a WCM-led approach, as opposed to a commerce-led approach would not be able to heed any of those cues whatsoever.
Am I right in assuming this, that a WCM-led approach starts with the customer? It starts with the research and them trying to find you and all. It starts with content.
Sure, content.
Not that commerce isn't important, because they got to buy, and you got to do that. But again, when you lead with a WCM approach, you're sort of nurturing that customer with content before you're worrying about the transaction later, aren't you?
Exactly, and that is, it's even that point that you make, which is the typical scenario that folks are in, is that they've got this, great online website that's got a lot of content, that they've got a web team that's, or an editorial team that's churning out a fair amount of content on a fairly regular basis. It's not just some static content that happens to be supporting a store. And in that case, then, oh, by the way, they also start to sell some things via the commerce tool. I think it's that case where you're going to be able to, really make use of a WCM-led approach.
All right, let's switch gears and look at the commerce-led approach. And am I right in putting it this way, that things have advanced, you keep using the word maturity, to the point now where you could make the argument that if your e-commerce platform is robust enough, you don't need to invest in a huge WCM, do you?
See, I don't think that that's necessarily true. I mean, well, so if your point is that the kind of, I think, here's the thing, is I think that the more mature commerce platforms that are out there are more mature at doing commerce. They're not necessarily more mature at producing or displaying web content. That's the thing, is that the evolution of kind of the enterprise commerce platforms versus the not are really all about that. how many SKUs can they manage, and whether or not it has PIM-like capability, product information management capabilities, and whether or not they can handle multiple pricing structures, like it's showing this price for this sort of a person and this price for that sort of a person, or in a B2B business, it's showing for account-specific stuff, or it's allowing for couponing and all these other very common kind of commerce mature needs, not necessarily content mature needs. And so that's really where the more mature commerce players still aren't necessarily that great at content.
So again, let me sort of argue against you a little bit.
Sure.
If it's an e-commerce-led approach, and the e-commerce platform can deliver the experience, the Amazon model, I may not need a lot of the things that go. I'm not making it an either or. I'm sounding like I am. But I guess if it's led, I guess what I'm trying, the direct question is, what's the difference when I'm led by an e-commerce approach and an e-commerce
I think, look, primarily that's going to be your store. That's like, a company that, there are an awful lot of companies out there that just sell content online. Sorry, not content, just sell products online. And for those products that just are in the business of selling products online, and they're not making use of a lot of content, and they're not using dynamic or rich content or that sort of stuff, because they are primarily, what you want when you want to buy from I don't know, Sears, and so when you go to their store, you're not going there to go read about anything, you're just going there to go buy products. Well, in fact, then that's going to be the definite advantage of a commerce-led.
You are watching CMS Connected. I'm Butch Stearns of the Pulse Network. This is Scott Lewer of Digital Clarity Group. On this edition of this show, we're talking about who's driving the digital commerce bus. We're really talking about digital experiences and how companies, I think all companies understand that much better than ever now. They embrace the fact that both internally and externally, from your consumer and your end users to your B2B relationships to your lines of business internally, they're all involved in the digital experiences that you go through to get your products, your solutions, and your services to market. So let's talk about a hybrid approach, because we talked about a WCM-led approach, which sort of infers that the WCM is delivering the experience. We talked about an e-commerce-led approach, which sort of infers that the e-commerce is leading the experience. In a hybrid approach, it's shared responsibility for the delivery of the experience. That's really what defines a hybrid approach, isn't it?
It is. Although, folks talk a lot about a hybrid approach, but, I've yet to see really a good true hybrid approach. I think most of the times the true hybrid approaches are coming from those platforms that actually offer both solutions together. So we had, for example, James Norwood from EPiServer on. Well, EPiServer has a commerce product and a content product, and they've done a fairly good job of integrating the two of those. And so now you don't really have to choose one or the other, because both are offered up and are capable. But it's very difficult when you bring two larger scale kind of enterprise products together to get them to kind of both be quote unquote leaders. It's much more easier said than done.
So to amplify your point, you're recommending that you choose one or the other.
No, not necessarily. Actually, I think it's more of a call to the arms for the industry to see, companies like Sitecore who have gone out there and bought a commerce platform, or for look at what Hybris has done, where Hybris is now starting to take on more content capabilities, or looking to, or IBM that has kind of big players that have traditionally been sold, and Oracle that have been sold very separately, that they're now, I think the call to arms is for them to actually bring these products together in meaningful ways, so that we can start to see the hybrid approach as kind of the way to go for these larger enterprises. It is today for mid-market, but it's more difficult for the larger mature.
I want to wrap up with a couple of statements that you can comment on, but one more point about a hybrid approach. Discuss web CMS and e-commerce solutions that connect very well together and do offer a great digital commerce solution.
Yeah, so you want some examples of some product companies? Yeah, I mean, look, you've seen a lot from, there's a product company, a commerce company called Elastic Path, and Elastic Path was basically built on the notion that it's all about APIs and integrating with other platforms. It doesn't want to be the front-led anything, it just really wants to support your content needs. They do a lot of work with a number of the platforms, especially with Adobe. That's certainly one of them. You look at, I think, what the notion of a Hybris has done. Hybris is also a very popular commerce product out there that's doing a lot of, they've gone to market a lot with Adobe, but also with a number of other ones, with OpenText and SDL and a few as well. So I think those are some really good examples of e-commerce products out there that are doing great things. But I also don't want to diss, like I mentioned, the likes of even a small company like a Bridgeline or an EPiServer or Sitecore and what they're going to be pulling together, because I think that really is where we're going to start to see the native merging together of content and commerce, but it tends to be targeted today towards the more kind of mid-market, lower maturity needs.
So Scott, let's talk about collaboration. For companies creating unified digital experiences for customers, e-commerce and marketing organizations, they must collaborate more closely on both organization and technology strategies. Talk about that.
No, that's valid. I think one of the biggest things in this space is, again, you've got different teams who tend to be running the web content side versus who tend to be running the product, the online store. And certainly, as we're seeing the technology to come together, we have to see the organizations come together too.
Current levels of collaboration show a positive effect on many key business efforts, especially conversion rates and operational processes.
Absolutely. The kind of, Lisa Welchman, who we've had on the show before, likes to talk about the frenetics of a website, that you can actually see how well the organization kind of works together by its website. And I think that's very true. So those that have the silos kind of broken down that are working well together have a much better digital experience.
And finally, companies hoping to create unified experiences for marketing and commerce end-to-end for their customers must revisit their working relationship and their technology strategies. That's ongoing.
Yeah, that is ongoing, and that's very true. I mean, I think definitely the organizational change and the organizational kind of hierarchy and how they work, as well as the strategy, those are even far more than the technology itself. It's really all about that.
All right, who's driving the digital commerce bus in 2015? That is our deep dive into that question and into that discussion on this edition of CMS Connected. All right, time now for our In the Spotlight segment on this edition of CMS Connected. I'm Butch Stearns of the Pulse Network, and in the Spotlight today, we are going to be reviewing CrownPeak. CrownPeak, incorporated in 2001, they pioneered the software as a service delivery method for web content management systems. They're headquartered in Los Angeles. Currently, they have more than 3,500 websites in production in over 75 languages and support for more than 10,000 end users. And in this edition of In the Spotlight, we bring in once again from Falcon Software, Sunny Lenarduzzi. Sunny, how are you?
I'm great. How are you?
Excellent. So let's dive right into this. Tell us a little bit more about CrownPeak. What are they all about, in your opinion?
Well, you kind of mentioned one of the main points here is that, well, they were one of the first content management systems out there. They were founded in 2001, like you said, pioneered the SaaS model, which is huge. Started out selling to mid-market. Now, obviously, they're aimed at enterprise, and they really scaled to performance over the years. And what's interesting about CrownPeak and what makes me really excited about them, and I know that I'm generally excited about everything I review, but with CrownPeak, I find it really interesting that they're a native cloud service, and it sets them apart from who I perceive their competition is, in the sense that all of the development has to be done via their API low-code environment. So really, this allows anybody across an organization to apply all the right methods and to use the system and to develop the content management system for their organization in a seamless way, and allows everybody to coordinate together without stepping on each other's toes. And it's made them an innovator in the industry and a leader in the industry as well.
All right, let's bring in Scott Leora into this conversation. Scott, it's always sunny where Sunny is, and there's reasons to be excited about CrownPeak. Yeah, what are your thoughts about CrownPeak?
Yeah, I like CrownPeak and what those folks are doing over there. She's right. As one of the first SaaS players in the market, they were very much groundbreaking in terms of as far as that goes. I think one of the challenges that they might have faced over the years, though, has been that. And Sunny, you tell me if you see this or not, is to me, as they have moved up from kind of a focus on the mid-market into the focus on the enterprise, I wonder if that delivery model, that SaaS delivery model, which emphasizes less coding and kind of more configuration, has been a stumbling block for them, as many in the enterprise tend to have very kind of idiosyncratic needs. And I wonder if that's just, if you heard any of that from them or any of their customers.
Yeah, I mean, definitely. I think that's a worthy point to make for sure. But I know that the benefit that they have when it comes to coding is that they are constantly adapting it. I mean, some of the coding when it comes to a player like Adobe is 15 years old, whereas with CrownPeak, they're constantly developing it. I know that they just came out with new code for their search in January. So I think it's something that they're evolving and adapting all the time. So I wouldn't necessarily say that that's a downside to the company.
Great. And they were just recently named as a visionary. I think that this is the first time they kind of finally broke through and got onto the Gartner MQ. Tell us why do you think it is that Gartner sees them now as a visionary?
Well, I mean, they're definitely a game-changing company for sure. And like I said, constantly evolving, constantly adapting to the changes in the market. But one of the tactical points to this designation, I think, is that they were the only multi-tenant cloud platform included in the report. They definitely have market momentum right now. Gartner's obviously talking with Fortune 500 companies and 250 companies, and they have good market presence there. And also the companies that they're working with are doing very innovative and very powerful things. So they're getting a lot of attention in a lot of other ways. So I think that's a huge aspect to why they were given that title. Like I said, they're constantly moving with the changes in the industry. So as their customers are building custom apps or mobile apps across platforms, CrownPeak is evolving and adapting to those changes for custom content across all platforms. And I think outside of strictly marketing, which is what we generally tend to focus on, the platform has a built-in line of business applications. So for example, everything from front-ending your retirement portfolio for a Fortune 500 company to claims processing for a Fortune 100 company in the insurance sector, they acknowledge that platforms need to be readily used in conjunction with all applications related to digital web experiences and new applications. So the spectrum of what they're able to do and the set of scenarios that they're able to work with is much broader.
You're listening to Sunny Lenarduzzi of Falcon Software. This is In the Spotlight. In this edition of CMS Connected, Butch Stern, Scott Lewer from Digital Clarity Group. Scott, to you, briefly, what's the significance of them being named a visionary by Gartner here?
Look, I think one of the most significant aspects of it is that Gartner is finally able to kind of recognize someone in the SaaS model. I mean, I think, frankly, it says more about them coming along more so than CrownPeak arriving. I think, for a long time, we've seen the legacy analyst firms like Gartner and Forrester have a little bit of a kind of tunnel vision. And while they acknowledge both open source and the SaaS models, they don't really put their money where their mouth is, I think, until now, finally. So I think the fact that they've made it on here, they've made the criteria such that these guys can fit onto this, and they are a good option for many. And back to the point that I made earlier, I don't want to be the naysayer always, or the anti-Sunny, the cloudy. Am I the cloudy if she's the Sunny? but I think it's a valid point also that there are many enterprises that all think they have extremely idiosyncratic needs, when in fact they really don't. They have content management needs, and so a solution like this can serve many. And the fact that it doesn't require nearly the amount of time to market as many of the other solutions out there, I think it should be well looked at by many folks.
Yes, Sunny. So what is one of the main benefits you want to point out about using CrownPeak?
Well, to Scott's point, I think speed in getting to the market is a huge benefit for them. But I think by far, they're the best product for global site management. So corporate marketing and head offices are really able to empower local global teams to produce their own experience in their own location, which is so huge because nobody knows your region better, your market better, your demographic better than the people that are actually on the ground. So CrownPeak makes it easy to manage these systems around the world and empower their teams locally to do really great things with their platforms. Another strong benefit is that it's uniquely suited to front-ending legacy applications, which really enables a unified customer experience. And in my opinion, that really is the future of the market.
Great. So Sunny, how about as far as the competitive landscape is concerned, I know for a long time, everyone used to look at CrownPeak and they'd also look at another product called Clickability and say these two were the biggest competitors for each other, kind of merely because they were both the only SaaS kind of model platforms out there. But who do you say are their competitors today?
Well, it's obviously become a much more crowded market for them, I think, in the last couple of years. But all the big ones are Sitecore and Adobe. Acquia and Ektron from time to time are also considered competitors of theirs. But the differentiator for CrownPeak, one of the main ones, is that it's a much lower cost alternative. So they definitely have that as a benefit to their platform.
Sunny, who are some of the notable names using CrownPeak?
There's quite a few. MetLife is one of the bigger ones. So they're using CrownPeak for all of their global markets. Lilly is a really interesting company that is one of their customers, and it's one of the largest pharmaceutical companies in the world, and they're using CrownPeak for their digital customer experience, which is a pretty huge coup for them. And then Kaiser Permanente, Men's Warehouse, Prudential, Bank of New York, lots of very notable names on their list of customers.
I'd say, even just looking at a lot of the customers that you mentioned there, you said that Acquia was a big competitor of theirs, and I would see them going head to head an awful lot, especially Acquia's got their, what they call their website factory model. I think that CrownPeak is very well reputed for having something very similar, where you essentially have, with a large pharmaceutical company, for example, like Eli Lilly, where they just need to have hundreds of websites for each one of the various product lines and things. So it's a suitable competitor for that. So great, thanks very much.
Thank you.
All right, Sunny, any final comment about CrownPeak? Anything we left out?
No, but I mean, it's not surprising that I'm excited to see where the future is headed for this company, but maybe that's just my Sunny disposition. I don't know.
Sunny Lenarduzzi from Falcon Software and this edition of In the Spotlight on CMS Connected. Sunny, great talking with you.
Thank you.
Good to see you, Sunny.
Time now on CMS Connected for our CMS Insider segment, and that insider would be you.
I guess
Scott
so.
Lewer of Digital Clarity Group.
I guess so.
This is the segment where we throw a softball in your court and you hopefully hit it out of the park.
Okay.
Rip it apart.
All right.
Dive into a subject that you're passionate about. Today you want to talk about Apple Pay.
I do.
Why?
Well, I mean, number one, it's fitting for a show that's been focused on commerce, right? And I think number two is I want to draw some parallels over to kind of why Apple Pay is really relevant in the content space today, and some of the implications that I think it's going to have on the wider space.
So little history. Let's talk about Apple Pay. The iPhone 6 came out. Apple Pay, like Apple always does, wants to corner the market. They give you the ability now to take your iPhone, walk into a store and pay. But when we look a little deeper into Apple Pay, it's a little unique here. I'm not giving up a lot of my data when I do that, am I?
I think that's the significance, and this is something that I'm not the only one to talk about. Tim Walters from my team has been kind of on this privacy kick lately, where he's been kind of notably worried about this idea that big data says, let's go gather all the information about customers that we can, and then we'll figure out what questions to ask about that later and figure out what insights to pull out later. And he's been worried that this is a very slippery slope. And I think the idea that Apple Pay comes into this, and essentially a fundamental difference between Apple Pay and any of these others, is that Apple Pay does not either provide the data to the banks nor to the stores. And so the significance of that is now think about back just how long ago was it that Target had that big debacle where they gave up all that, where they were hacked rather to get all that information from their merchant system. This now essentially protects customers against things like that, because now when you pay with Apple Pay, you no longer give your customer data to that store.
So I'm a store, and most stores accept Apple Pay now, but I don't get that data. I mean, that's a challenge for me, isn't it? I want that data.
Exactly. You're annoyed by this, and frankly, you might push back, as many have done. Many stores have pushed back against the idea of Apple Pay, or they've decided to actually go and create alliances between the banks and the stores directly to essentially circumvent this. But I think that's that's not going to be a strategy that proves very well, as the music industry had trouble pushing back against iTunes. And I think we've seen the history, we know how this is going to end, that ultimately consumers will demand that Apple Pay work. And I think one of the things that this is going to do is it's going to raise specifically this awareness of my data that, typically, Butch, before, when you look at this, that we gain convenience as consumers, the more data that we give up about ourselves. So this idea that I can have a tailored, relevant experience online is something that I get only because I'm willing to give up data and information about myself. In this case, we actually have a greater convenience in this use of Apple Pay, but I'm not giving up any data whatsoever.
So let's finish with this point. From a consumer standpoint, and as you said, I think consumers will drive this and it'll all get worked out. However, I'm in this day and age. I'm willing to give up some of my data because it is more convenient for me. One of the trade-offs is when I walk in that store or I go in that online store or I do e-commerce, they know me now.
Right.
Amazon knows everything about me. And by the way, they're pushing me relevant data. So the flip side would be, it's less convenient now because I got to start at square one every time I do a transaction. Really?
So, look, I think here's the thing. I think number one question that people could legitimately ask is, even if the technology was there to do a lot of this personalization and tailoring, A, how much of it was really happening? And B, how much of it were we accepting just because we felt like we necessarily had to, that there was not really an alternative? There was no option before. This was just kind of, we were all going down this path and marching to this drumbeat, but I don't know that we necessarily were taking conscious decisions. But, with things like Target's big debacle, I think people are looking at this and they're a lot more worried about this generally today, and to see that there's an alternative now might appease many. And I think the significance, though, quickly on content management, is that you look at if you look at the strategies of the leaders, look at Adobe and look at Sitecore and look at Acquia, everything is all about this idea of being able to create these personalized, relevant, targeted experiences, which definitely require, and they've all rebuilt and relaunched their infrastructures so that they can capture all of this essentially big data below. If suddenly personalization at the expense of privacy is under fire, then what happens? How relevant are those strategies anymore? I'm not so sure.
I know you're the CMS insider, so I don't want to steal your thunder, but I'm going to give you my prediction on what's going to happen with this.
Go ahead.
Very quickly, it's going to get to a point where Apple is going to give you, the consumer, the choice to share your personal data or not. I think because that's what we're all about. It's all about the people.
I think it's a good point. And so is Apple's all about the people, right?
He's Scott Lewer. I'm Butch Stearns. Before we say goodbye on this edition of CMS Connected, we want to thank our guests, Sunny Lenarduzzi in our Spotlight segment, as always, James Norwood and Seth Earley in our Headline segment. Also, we'd like to thank our lead sponsors, Falcon Software and Digital Clarity Group, for making CMS Connected possible. Our next show, March 26th, Big Data is out, Smart Data is in. Speaking of everything you just talked about. Nice segue by you.
Good job, man.
So for all of you, get connected
And stay connected
on CMS Connected. We'll see you on March 26th.